Our mission at the Chamber is to increase the well-being of the LGBTQ community through financial gains, which includes helping you build your businesses and also helping you obtain employment that is not just employment that will pay bills, but that will help you down a track of a career with progressive companies that are looking for LGBTQ candidates. Part of our series this year, unfortunately, is online because of the COVID crisis, but we have partnered with some amazing folks to do a series of workshops this week that will culminate into our virtual job fair on Friday. We are looking forward to helping our community obtain incredible jobs and incredible companies doing incredible work. So it is with my great pleasure and honor to turn this all over to Carly Davis, who is our Director of Programs at the Chamber and also our Director of Ideation. Carly is the person in charge of making sure that we meet our vision and our mission through our programmatic work and what we bring to you, the community. So thank you all for being here. I'll let her introduce Chelsea, but we're also very grateful to be able to put together this workshop with you so that at the end of the day, you can have the resume that'll get you the job you want and that you'll enjoy. So happy resumeing and happy Pride. Turning it over to Carly.
Yes. Hi. Thank you everyone for joining. We're going to get started soon, but first I want to say this is our first webinar as a part of LGBTQ Job Week. As Grace mentioned, we planned a few job fairs. Some of you have attended in the past, some of you might have heard of them, and now we're just pushing for a whole virtual week of getting people ready to apply for jobs and potentially matching you up with some of our corporate partners. If that doesn't seem like a good fit, you can still walk away from all of this with a good resume, a good cover letter, interview tips, all of that good stuff. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Chelsea Dunham. She is the Assistant Director of Employer Engagement at the Emmanuel College Career Center and also the Assistant Coach of the basketball team. Chelsea's gonna give us some resume tips, some cover letter tips, maybe some networking tips. So take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carly and Grace. I'm just going to get my screen shared for you all here, and then we'll get going.
Yeah, and while you're doing that, I'll also say we'll be using the Q&A feature to take questions during this session. So you should be able to, if you hover over your screen, there's a little word bubble box that says Q&A, and I'll be helping monitor that. And if you have a question about a certain slide, I can bring it up then, or we'll have a designated question and answer period at the end of the session. So yeah, thanks so much.
Well, awesome. Like Carly said, I'm Assistant Director of Employer Engagement at Emmanuel College, and I'm so honored to be here and to take part in the Massachusetts LGBTQ plus Job Week. Here's my contact info. I will also share it at the end so that you all attending today can connect with me further. But for those of you who don't know, Emmanuel College is 2 blocks from Fenway. We're right in the Longwood Medical District. Currently, I'm working from home in Somerville with my new favorite colleague, my girlfriend. So we've been going 3+ months strong in our little home office, and we'll continue going at it for as long as we're in this virtual setting. But I'm so honored to be here and to talk through resume and covers letters with you. So this presentation is designed to meet you wherever you are at with your resume, whether you're in school, whether you're a young professional, whether you're an older professional, wherever you are with your resume and your professional career. I'm just going to give you some tips to help get your resume to the top of that stack. So hopefully you'll be able to gain some new insight to take your resume to the next level. So I just want to start with saying that you're going to see some funny names on our resume templates. At Emmanuel, we are the Saints. So we have a mascot named Halo Saint. We also have a very large Saint Bernard that roams campus daily, and her name is Emma. So you'll also see her as some of our resume template examples. But so first, to start off with the resume, I just want to go through the basic format of a resume and how to make sure that your resume is appealing and catching and free of errors. So first, you want to make sure you have your name there a little bit bolder than the rest of the font. And then right under your name, this is a great place to showcase your pronouns. And I'm definitely going to talk about how to showcase your identity so that you can be your authentic self within your resume and your interviewing documents. So right under your name, you can put your pronouns in parentheses. And then you want to make sure that you have your address, whether you're in school still or whether you've graduated, you have the option of a home address or your school address. We always say that if you're still in school and you're applying for an internship that is close to your campus, you're going to want to use your school address. If you're applying to a job or an internship that is closer to your home address, you can also use that. So next, it's important to put your phone number. A lot of hiring managers will touch base with you either phone or for email for that first round. And so you really want to make sure that a couple keys are, you're going to want to make sure your voicemail box is set up, as well as that your inbox is not full. Through my job working in employer engagement, I connect daily with recruiters, and they a lot of times share stories about interviewing, as well as just tips to help people make sure they get to the top of the list. And I've heard from a lot of recruiters that they've made that first phone call and either the inbox wasn't set up or the inbox was full, so they were unable to leave a message. So unfortunately, since they weren't able to connect with that potential recruit that round, they actually moved on. So it's really important to make sure that your inbox is able to leave a message and make sure that's professional and that it says your name so that recruiter knows that they're connecting with the right individual. Next, you're going to want to make sure you have your email on there. Make sure it's a professional email. If you're still in school, you can use your college's email address. If you are a graduate or if you're applying for jobs when you're a senior, you're going to want to shift that over to a professional Gmail because I know a lot of schools, sometimes you lose access to that email within like the first year of graduating. I don't want to date myself too much, but I always say make sure that email isn't similar to that instant messenger email that some of us used to have, because you definitely want to make sure that it's appropriate and also easily to retype. Because some employers, yes, they may be able to copy and paste that into an email, but sometimes if it's a PDF, they may be retyping that. So just do your best to make sure it doesn't have like a lot of symbols or a lot of numbers in it so that there leaves room for error. We always say too, is you always want to make sure you're not disclosing your age, because that's nothing that employers need to know in this process throughout this stage of the process. So for myself, I wouldn't put like Dunham 92, because then they might know that I was born in 1992 and then they can figure out my age. So we always say just kind of keep it simple and generic just to match your name. So next we're going to move on to, you want to make sure you have your education right there in the second section. So you'll state your college that you're attending, the degree you're either going to receive or that you've received, and then you can do your major as well as either a concentration or a minor. I know schools call it different things sometimes. And then as for GPA, we always say you can include your GPA or you don't have to. If you have a 3.5 or higher, that might be a good place to put your GPA. I know myself, I wasn't at a 3.5, so I didn't include my GPA. Wasn't terrible, but the employer didn't need to know that. And if you are anticipated to graduate, you'll put your anticipated graduation date. If you are a young professional and you've already graduated, you'll make sure to put that graduation date. I have heard from a lot of employers that, back to the GPA, that a lot of employers aren't looking at GPA as much anymore. They realize now that your GPA doesn't always correlate to your ability to do the job. I will say though, like in the science industries, they sometimes still do look for that GPA, or if you're using your resume to apply to grad schools, a lot of times they still will want to access that GPA. But at least for myself, I was glad to hear that a lot of employers aren't looking at GPA as much as a requirement to do the job.
Chelsea, I have a quick question also.
Yes.
If somebody's been out of school for a few years or has been in the job field for a longer period of time, should they still put their education at the top, or do they want to maybe swap that with some of their experience?
Yeah, so that's a good question. You'll definitely still want to keep your education on there because a lot of employers, some job descriptions, it still is required to have a bachelor's degree. So you'll still want to make sure that you showcase your education on there as well. And you also never know when that hiring manager could also be an alum of the college that you attended. So sometimes that can give you a little boost there as well. I will say that education, if you're 5+ years out or even like 10 years out, a lot of times you can shift the format of your education and your relevant experiences. So if you are applying to a job where your previous position is a really relevant experience for that next position, you can put that towards the top. But for most of us, we'll still want to continue to put that education because of those job experiences. They'll want to see that bachelor's as a requirement. So you can put that right there on the top, or you can move it towards the bottom, but you'll still want to make sure that you have that in your resume. Carly, was there any other questions on that first portion?
Yeah, one more came in. For those people who might be experiencing age discrimination, would you recommend omitting the graduation date, as you mentioned at the top, if they are like a few years out from graduation?
Yeah, that's a good question too. If you're finding that that's something that with age discrimination, you can still put the college in which you've received your degree, and you don't have to include that graduation date if you don't feel comfortable with that. I will say that I'll talk about this a couple different times throughout this presentation, but the resume is your document. It's your highlight reel. It's showing your experiences. You'll receive tips and tricks from me today, as well as under other individuals. And there's a few absolutes in a resume, which I'll talk about a little bit later, but a lot of it is, it's your personal choice to reflect your resume in the way you'd like to. So yes, you can choose to take out that exact graduation date, but you'll still want to say the degrees in which you received from that institution.
Great. And then to the other questions coming in, we'll loop back at the end during the larger question and answer period, but keep sending them in. Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad to have some questions. So I'll do my best to answer questions along the way and at the end. But if I do find there's a question that I can't answer, I'll make sure to touch base with some of my fellow colleagues at my Career Center, as well as other professionals, to make sure to get you the best answer. So we're going to move on to your relevant or professional experiences section. You can name these a couple different options. This template we have, it says relevant experiences. You can also name this section professional experiences and so forth. There's a bunch of different ways you can name it, but you're going to want to make sure that you put your current position that you're in or your most recent position first, and then you'll continue down in that descending order from most recent to your further down experiences. But you're going to want to make sure that you have the company in which you've worked at first in a little bit more bold, and then below you'll put your job title in italics, and then your bullet points for your job duties below. And then to the right, you'll see you have the dates. So you want to make sure that those dates align all the way across the right side of your resume with all your dates. That's one of those small mistakes that can sometimes happen with formatting, and they can get shifted. So you want to just make sure those are aligned, because sometimes, unfortunately, those small details and small errors can put your resume towards the bottom of the list. So if you're still in a role, you want to make sure that you mark that as present, and that you make sure that you're talking those bullet points in present tense. And then for your other experiences down below on the resume, you're going to want to make sure that you talk about those in past tense. So I will give a little tidbit that I've heard from employers, and we've heard there was a study done that shows recruiters spend 3 to 6 seconds on that first initial glance of a resume, deciding if they want to continue on reading that resume. So you're going to want to make sure that in those 3 to 6 seconds, they can really see that bold section of your name, your education, your relevant experiences. Just make sure the formatting makes it easy to skimmable to captivate and capture that recruiter in to spend longer than 3 to 6 seconds on your resume. So to move from our professional experiences or our relevant experiences, This extracurricular activities or continued on experiences is a great way to showcase your LGBTQIA identity as well as your experiences. So what we tell a lot of our students at Emmanuel, we have this example for our Outspoken Club. So this is our student club for our LGBTQIA students. So on this resume template, we show that this person was involved in Outspoken. They were the event coordinator. They planned, coordinated, oversaw student activities. So this is an awesome way to showcase if you're involved in a student group like Outspoken, or if you're involved in a professional association like OSTEM or Pride at Work. That's a great place to put that in there as well. If you've presented at conferences that are centered around the LGBTQIA community, you can put those in there as well. If you're a scholar and you've had studies or research publications done focused on the LGBTQIA community, you can put those in here too. So this is a great way to showcase your identity and your interests beyond just putting your pronouns as well. So I will say that I've given a couple tips, putting your pronouns, putting your extracurricular activities like this Outspoken in the resume. I will say that your resume is your document. So if you want to include your pronouns and include these experiences, that's awesome. And I highly encourage you to do so. But if you would like to leave those out of your resume, you can also do that as well. So I know for myself personally, when I was in college and for my first couple of years in my professional career, I wasn't involved in any student groups like this. So I actually didn't have any experiences to showcase my identity on my resume, but I'm super excited to now have some experiences that I can put on my resume. So I've also, a workshop I presented at was the Northeastern Reach Out Career Conference. So I have that workshop on there now. I'm also excited that our professional development is always expanding. So now I can put today's workshop on my resume as well. So although I might not have had those experiences when I first graduated college in my early professional career, I now have those experiences that I'm able to add on there as well. So I'm going to move on to a few additional sections that you can include in your resume as well. So beyond your professional experiences or maybe some of those extracurricular activities, you can also include volunteer service, athletics, campus leadership, clubs and organizations. If you have some honors and awards that you received, whether it was in your college experiences or in the workplace, you can include those as well. If you've presented at conferences, that's what I was saying. So that's how I'm able to include my LGBTQ identity on my resume, is through my conferences. You can include research if you're in the sciences or if you're in literature and you have some publications, or you can feel free to put those in research as well, and publication. Language skills is a great thing to include on your resume. I always say if you do speak more than one language, that is a great thing to include actually further up on your resume towards the top, maybe right under your education. I see some people put it way at the bottom, but really like that's something that you should celebrate, and employers want to know that you're multilingual. So definitely put that more towards the top. You can also have a skills section on your resume too. So we say that if you're including a skills section, you want these to be like hard skills and also skills that you're proficient at. So if you're in the sciences, you may include a skills section to show all the lab skills that you have. Or say you're in computer sciences, you do a skills section to show the different programming skills that you have. Or if you're in graphic design, you'd include Photoshop or other editing softwares that you have. But we always want to say if you're including a skills section on your resume, you want to make sure that you're proficient in those skills. So if you did land a job and they asked you to do something with that skill on like your very first day, that you'd be able to do that and not have any problems with it. I also say if there's any athletes in this space, like Carly said, I'm also assistant basketball coach at Emmanuel College. I've been coaching for 5 years now, and I also played college basketball as well at Southern New Hampshire University. So as an athlete, recruiters do like to see those experiences as well. So you can definitely put that, if you like, you can put that towards the top, like right in your education section. It doesn't have to be towards the bottom because employers like to see the skills that come along with like playing a team sport. So you can definitely put that on the top or the bottom. And like I said before, your resume is your document. So you can do some of these shifts. You can have some of these additional sections more towards the top if it's more relevant for the position you're applying to. So if you have a lot of volunteer services and you're applying to work at a nonprofit that's very volunteer focused, you can put your volunteer work more towards the top of your resume too. So a lot of these are interchangeable. The main thing obviously you don't want to change is you want to always make sure your name and your contact information is at the top of the resume, but everything else you can kind of fluctuate throughout, maybe depending on the opportunity that you're applying to make those most relevant experiences to that job towards the top of the resume. I'm just going to move on to some common mistakes, just so you're aware of sometimes the little mistakes that we all make. We're all humans, we all make mistakes, but I'm just going to highlight some of them so you can make sure to keep a lookout on your resume to make sure that you don't have any of those mistakes. So some of the small mistakes can be your bullet points are not lined up. They could be just a little off-centered. If it's less than a page or more than a page, the common resume template, you do want your resume to be one solid page. You wouldn't want to accidentally go over just by like a little bit onto that second page, because a recruiter a lot of times isn't going to look to see that second page because the standard resume template is one page. So you wouldn't want those amazing experiences that you have to be lost on that second page. A lot of times extra spaces or uneven spaces can be a mistake if your experiences don't line up, if your dates drop to the second line. Unnecessary identifiers, you don't need to have like phone before your phone number or email before your email. We're living in a digital age where we know what emails are and phone numbers are now, so you don't need to waste any space with that. If you're missing your email address or phone number, you definitely don't want to miss those, because then the recruiter can't get in touch with you. I know a lot of resumes used to have objective statements. So that's where you gave like a statement on who you are and what you were looking to do. So that is a little bit more of an outdated practice now. So an objective statement isn't something that needs to be included on a resume. You want to make sure you don't have any personal information on there, like your age, picture, definitely not your social security number. Unfortunately, these are on there because people have done those mistakes. So just make sure you don't have any of that. You don't need to have an interest section. That also was an outdated practice for resumes. Now that's something that could come up in your interview, but you don't need to put that on your resume. You also don't need to have any of your references on your resume document. That would be a separate sheet, a separate document that a recruiter might ask for when you're a little bit further on in the process. You don't want to use any I, me, or my statements in your resume. These are all direct statements based on your experiences. So like I mentioned before, you want to make sure you're in the correct tenses. So if it's a present job, use the present tense. If it's a past experience, use that past tense. You don't need to put any of the number of hours you've worked or salary info on your resume. You definitely don't want to put salary info because you want to kind of hold some of those things close to the chest so that when you're in that negotiation process later, you can maybe get yourself a little bit more than you made at your previous job. And spelling and grammatical errors are the biggest things that hold people back from getting their resume to that next level. So myself, I'll be honest, I'm a terrible speller, always have been, always will be. So if you've never heard of Grammarly, it's amazing. Download it. It's an extension that you can connect to your email. That way, if you're emailing back and forth with a recruiter, you're not making mistakes there. You can also run your resume through it so you can pick up any of those small errors that I know I often miss. I will say too, have somebody, a second set of eyes, take a peek at your resume. I know personally I miss a lot of those small errors. So have somebody, either a trusted friend, take a peek at it, or I will say there is a lot of career centers that actually have services for their alumni. So if there's any Emmanuel students in this room or Emmanuel alum, we offer our services for our alumni. So maybe even it's worth taking a look on the website and reaching out to your institution and see if your career center still offers alumni services. But just to give a small example about how like small errors can keep you from getting to that next level. Like I said, I work with recruiters and I hear stories all the time. I also hear a lot of stories from our career advisors that work closely with students in the job search. So we were, one of my colleagues was working with an alum who was applying. They're an English teacher and they had a lot of years of experience. They were looking for a new job at a new school, and they were applying and applying and applying and weren't sure why they were hearing back. And obviously all of us, it's very quick to jump to assumptions on why we think people don't want to hire us. But it turned out when the career advisor took a look at their resume that they had the smallest spelling mistake in the first paragraph of their cover letter. And so even though the person had amazing experiences, that cover letter, that one mistake was keeping them from getting that call. So I can't emphasize enough, just have a second set of eyes, take a peek at your resume.
Could I hop in with a few questions?
Yes,
Before
definitely, please do. I can go back.
Absolutes? Awesome. I know, just like to throw in my own 2 cents, because I've worked to hire people to work at the chamber, and while we've seen a ton of great resumes, I feel like not a deal breaker, but something that does take away from the experience of like just flipping through a pile is if a resume is more than 1 page, it can make it hard to get through. So somebody asks tips for if you've been working for like 20 years, how to summarize that into 1 page on a resume. Because I know it gets hard of like which experiences to leave on or take off. So do you have any tips around that?
Yeah, so I would definitely make sure you choose the experiences that are most relevant to that job that you were applying for. So you want to have your most recent employment up there first, and then include maybe, because you usually have space for about I've seen space for about 3 job experiences in total on a resume. So, and then maybe add the 2 that you feel like are also most relevant to that job that you're applying for. I will say usually in general, when you have that long of experience, those first couple jobs that you may have had as a young professional sometimes tend to kind of get pushed off and no longer are included on there. I think an awesome way to make sure that that a recruiter might still be seeing all of your experiences is to make sure your LinkedIn is really up to date. Because you actually can include your LinkedIn URL, your small little URL on your resume, on top of your resume, if you'd like to include that instead of like an address. If you don't want to include your personal address, you can include your URL to your LinkedIn address on there. So then the recruiter could click in and see all the wonderful years of experience that you have and all the various job opportunities that you've had. So that's a great way that the recruiter can take a look at all your experiences, but in terms of on your resume, you'll just want to pick those 3 experiences that hold the most relevant to that job that you're applying for. So hopefully that helps answer your question. And I can always talk further one-on-one via email with some of you folks after this if you need some more guidance.
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is definitely a great way to do that. And I've been seeing more LinkedIn URLs too. And then one more question that I'm going to put in here. There's a bunch of trends with resumes, and I know this person's asking specifically about resume pictures, where some people were starting to put more pictures on their resumes the last few years, and I saw that kind of come in and go out. So is that more of a trend? Should people stay away from that? It could like help employers notice you, but what's kind of like the downside of doing that?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to talk about pictures I'm going to talk more about a creative resume in a couple slides. So I'll get into the pictures a little bit more in a sec.
Great. Okay, thanks.
Cool. All right, so we'll move on to absolutes. So this is what I was talking about before, how you're going to receive many different opinions about your resume. You're receiving an opinion from me today. You may receive opinion from a friend, another colleague, or a relative that works in HR. And that's totally great to kind of like absorb all those different opinions. And, but I just want to point out that there are a few absolutes and things that you absolutely want to make sure are on your resume, and the rest of them are simply preferences. So I'm going to jump into those absolutes. As I mentioned at Emmanuel, we are the Saints. So a lot of the stuff we do is branded around being the Saints. So I apologize if this is kind of funny for those of you who don't go to Emmanuel, but it's still the same. It's still the same content. It's still the same message. So first you want to make sure so these are all the absolutes. You want to make sure that your resume is skimmable. Like Carly was saying, since she's been a hiring manager for some positions, is if it gets really long or it's not formatted right, it can be really hard to take in that information. And if a resume is hard to read, sometimes unfortunately that might get you pushed off to the side as well. So make sure it's skimmable, make sure they can see the education, experience, your honors, and all those things simply by just taking that quick 3 to 6 seconds and see those core things and then move on to reading more. You want to make sure that your resume is accurate. You definitely don't want to falsify any of your background. You don't want to inflate any of your education or experiences. I will say that sometimes people don't intentionally mess up a resume. But I will say that what we've seen sometimes, what our students have done to make a mistake is we'll have like a double major and they'll put 2 bachelor's degrees. So at Emmanuel, I know some institutions are different like this. So, but at Emmanuel, we only extend 1 bachelor's degree, and then you have a double major within that 1 bachelor's degree. So sometimes somebody might say, oh, they had a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Science, but really it was just 1 bachelor's degree and then double majors on there. So that's like a small way that you could accidentally put something on, a lie on there, but not really mean to. Another way that we've seen people accidentally not be accurate is for, especially for our students that hold summer jobs. So they may say summer 28, or they may say 2018 through 2020, but really it was just summers 2018, summers 2019. So it wasn't that full consecutive 2 years. So what that recruiter sees is you've worked there for 2 years, but you're gonna wanna make sure that you make that example of just the summers that you worked there. So that's a small way where you might not be accurate, but it wasn't intentional. The next one is individual ownership. Like I keep saying, this is your document. This is your highlight reel. This is your experiences. So you really want to make sure that everything you put on there, you understand it. It's you're owning it. It's your document. I know sometimes people have gone through resume writers, especially maybe if you're a little bit longer in your professional career, you may use a resume writer, which some people do that, and that is okay. But you want to make sure that you understand everything that's on that resume. That way, when you are in an interview, if you're being asked about something that's specific on your resume or they're pointing something out on your resume, you want to make sure that you remember what's on there and you have that ownership of those experiences. The next absolute is no errors. I'll reiterate this again because it's one of the most important things, is just making sure you don't have any of those small spelling errors. You don't want to give an employer any reason to not keep reading your resume. The last one is targeted. You're going to want to make sure that your resume is targeted to each individual position. So I know sometimes when we're applying to a lot of jobs, it's easy just to have that standard resume or that standard cover letter and just send all of those in. But sometimes that's okay. But sometimes that recruiter can really see, oh, this is just like a standard resume. And to them, it's looking like you're not interested enough to make it more tailored. So you want to make sure it's targeted and you really draw in those experiences so the recruiter knows that you're really interested and know that you really want to have that job. So I meant to do this plug earlier, but on average, a corporate recruiter will receive about 200 job applications. So they'll receive 200 resumes for 1 position. So that's why we're talking a lot about the small details of the formatting, of the spelling, of the targeted email, because you want to be one of those resumes that gets grabbed out of that 200. And I've actually been talking to a couple of different recruiters. Obviously, we're all aware that our job market is very different right now than it was 4 months ago. So we've seen recruiters have talked about getting anywhere from 5 times to 50 times more resumes than they did prior to COVID. So especially, it's even more important that your resumes are top notch so that you can catch their eye. So I'm going to move on to the bullet points. I know some people feel like the bullet points are the most daunting part of the resume, which they can feel like that, but they're also the most important part of your resume. So you really want to make sure that you take the time and you build those bullet points up to really hook that recruiter in, because when they read your bullet points, those are like the hook lines to really capture that recruiter into continuing on reading. So here's this awesome little equation to make sure that your bullet points are strong. So you want to have the skill that you have, how you have that skill, and the proof in those bullet points. So for just a couple job examples, so the first one is for somebody who worked in the service industry. So the skill that they have is they waited on tables and took orders. So some people on a resume may just say waited on tables and took orders, but really there's so much more to that, and you can really expand on that into a more in-depth bullet point, and you can say developed positive customer service skills in a fast-paced 50-table restaurant. So for this, your skill is customer service. How you have that skill is through a fast-paced restaurant, and the proof of that skill is the 50 tables that you waited on. So for another example, taught students rules of residence halls. So I will apologize. I know we have some people that are older professionals in here. So again, I apologize that some of these examples that we have may be more tailored towards a student. They may be in school right now. So this last one is taught students rules of residence halls. So a way that you can really expand that bullet point is independently presented topics on a manual policies and procedures to groups of 15 plus. So the skill you have is you're an independent worker. How you have that skill is creating presentations, and the proof of that is presenting to groups of 15 plus. So it's so important that, oops, sorry, skip that. It's so important that you want to showcase your skills and showcase your bullet points with data points as much as possible. So if you have those data points like this, the 50 tables or the 15 plus students, like really include those data points so that you can even more so show the recruiter what you've done within your previous role to make them see that you're capable of doing so many great things within their role as well. So hopefully this helps you calm down a little bit about bullet points, because I know for a lot of our students, myself included at one point, the bullet point seemed to be the scariest thing, but really just take that small equation of the skill you have, how you have that skill, and the proof, and that'll help you build really strong bullet points that really hook that recruiter in to wanting to continue to learn more about you. So this is going to help answer that question that we previously had. So for a lot of our creatives in the room, if you're in marketing or graphic design, you do have the option of creating a creative resume. And so this is just a quick excerpt of one of ours. Again, our funny names, Emma Saint. But so creative resume still has the same absolutes as a regular resume does. So you're still going to want to make sure you have your name at the top, your education. You're going to want to make sure that you have your contact information, as well as your relevant experiences. So we say, because online you'll see, especially like if you're looking at resumes online, you'll see some people are putting pictures. So we actually discourage from putting pictures on there, because especially if you're doing a creative resume, we find it's a good chance to showcase your skills by maybe creating a logo at the top. So you'll see this was an ES. So this helps show your graphic design capabilities and your understanding of branding through a logo right there. And also the tough part is with pictures, you don't, as much as we're striving towards like a more inclusive world and everything like that, unfortunately, we all hate to say it, but there may be employers out there that may discriminate based on your photo, and we would never want to give somebody that chance to, because as wrong as that is, that's kind of another reason to discourage from using a photo. I know some applicant tracking systems later on may ask for a photo, or sometimes through LinkedIn, they can see your photo as well if they're really curious to see what you look like. In terms of the resume though, you don't need to put that on there. It's also taking away valuable space that you can be really showcasing your experiences as well. So definitely use a logo of your initials if you're wanting to showcase some of those skills. So hopefully that helps answer that question. And then one more thing about creative resumes is you just want to make sure that you're using a light color. You don't want to put anything too bright on there, especially if somebody has visual impairments. Those bright colors can make it a little bit harder for them to read and decipher those words. So definitely use like a neutral color. I just want to quickly talk about resumes versus CVs. So you're going to see some hiring managers, you'll see on their applicants when you're applying, they may say, please submit your resume, please submit your CV. Really, the resume and CV is just, it's an interchangeable word that can just be, it's essentially saying, submit us your documents. So a resume is what we've been talking about, a very traditional one-page resume focusing on your experiences. A CV is a little bit more extensive and can have multiple pages. So if you're in the sciences, or this is where you might be using more of a CV, because that can showcase your academic accomplishments, some of the courses, especially if you're a professor, you're going to want to showcase maybe the courses you've taught, publications, research, grants, awards, professional development. So this is a longer type document that does end up being in multiple pages, but usually, unless you're more so in that sciences, you're gonna wanna use a resume. But also to answer the question for the individual that said they had a lot of years of experience, if a lot of your experiences are very relevant, then you can actually move towards more of like a CV template where you do have multiple pages. So essentially, if you see somewhere when you're applying to a job, they say submit your CV or submit your resume, essentially just submit your document and what you have to showcase your experiences. So we're gonna move on to talk about cover letters. So cover letters, again, sometimes people get a little bit more extra nervous with these, with cover letters as opposed to resumes. Don't let yourself get nervous by a cover letter, because this is actually a really awesome chance to showcase yourself and showcase your experiences beyond just the listed off bullet points of a resume. You can actually get a little bit more in depth about your experiences that you've had and different things that you've done within your job. So you can actually talk about maybe a specific project that you've worked on that may correlate to that position. So this is a great opportunity to really talk about yourself a little bit more. And what's nice about a resume is you can talk a little bit more with the I, and you can be a little bit more personal. I will say with resumes or cover letters, I know it's tough because sometimes we don't want to talk about ourselves. I know culturally we're taught to kind of be like a little humble, but this is where you get to brag. Like, this is where you get to be like, I am awesome. You should hire me. Don't even look at any of those other 200 resumes because they got nothing on me. Like, I'm so much better. So this is that chance where you get to be a little bit more personal and talk about why you are awesome. So just a small little tip too, if you're addressing your cover letter and there is no hiring manager or you don't know who to address, you can just say, Dear Hiring Committee. I know a lot of people used to do To Whom It May Concern. That is a little bit more outdated. So you can definitely just say, Dear Hiring Committee, and they'll get the point of who it's to. But if there's a name on that job posting, which sometimes there is, 100% include that person's name. So I'm just gonna walk through a little bit so on the left, you'll see this is a job posting, and on the right is the cover letter. So a lot of companies do use AI software to take a look at that cover letter or that resume for that first round before that hiring manager gets a bundle of resumes. So I'm gonna teach you how to beat the AI and get your resume past those computers and get that in the hands of a recruiter. So the way you do that is by taking those keywords in that job description and putting them in your cover letter. So obviously you don't just want to like dump a bunch of words in there that don't make sense to your experience, but make sure you're taking those parts of the job description that match your experiences, that are things that you have, and put that in the cover letter so that people can see. I'm just going to kind of click through and I'll show how things are highlighted and how it's moved over. So if you have certain things that are like a solid requirement, like a bachelor's degree is a requirement, you're going to want to make sure you put bachelor's over in your cover letter. Interest in media and advertisement, this is correlated into passion for the industry. So it doesn't have to be verbatim, because you definitely wouldn't want to look like your cover letter plagiarized their job description. So you're just going to want to make sure that you also use some of your own wording as well, but it's still the same concept. Social media intern, partner with strategies. This is collaborated with colleagues. So you just kind of see the client's marketing goals, how you can pull things in. Obviously, you're not going to want to pull the entire thing in, but you can pull things over as well. So hopefully that helps you understand cover letters a little bit more. These are something you definitely want to make sure is targeted each time. So sometimes your resume can be that simple resume that you submit to every single job and maybe isn't quite as targeted, but you 100% want to make sure that your cover letter is targeted to that specific position. And now I have talked to a lot of recruiters about, like, do you read the cover letters? Do you not read the cover letters? And honestly, it's all over the place. So some recruiters read it, some recruiters don't. Some recruiters will read the resume first and then the cover letter. So there's really no like definitive people are reading it or they're not reading it. So always put your 100% best effort into that cover letter in case you are coming across a recruiter that puts a lot of weight in that cover letter. And sometimes too, if a recruiter, I have heard this from a recruiter, that they have 2 resumes that are practically identical. And they're like, wow, both of these individuals would be awesome for the job, but how do I decide who I really want to bring in for like an interview? They'll take another look at the cover letter and then compare those. And so that cover letter may be that second thought, but it may be that second thought that gives you that leg up to have a leg up on that other candidate. So that's how you beat the AI. As much as sometimes it feels like the robots may be coming and taking over, but this is how you beat the AI in terms of in the job world. Get those keywords from that job description over into that cover letter.
I have a keyword question.
Yes.
So if the person has a more advanced degree than what the job calls for, say they have a master's when it calls for a bachelor's, if they put the word master's in, does that mess up the AI, like fighting the robots?
So I'm not a true expert on fighting the robots,
Cool.
but because it is, I would assume it's still going to pick that up because it's a higher degree than that bachelor's. Yeah. So you put that in there, and I'm sure that'll still get it through.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions on cover letters?
There are a few. Another one, people have seen bullet points used in cover letters. Do you have thoughts on that?
So like I was saying, you're going to receive like advice from myself and other individuals. Everything that I've learned and everything that I've heard from employers is they want to see it in that paragraph format so that they can see that you can also like write in a coherent level and also be able to take what they're saying, because they're giving you the bullet points. They want to see that you can also write professionally. It's a good way to judge if somebody's going to be able to write those professional emails where they can translate their thought into a well written out email. So I don't know if a bullet points would be, in my opinion, I say write it in the paragraph structure, because a lot of times it's seen as a writing example on how you're going to be able to communicate through emails too.
I completely agree. Yeah. And I also want to say from personal experience, if anybody's looking to like pivot a career, I've used the cover letter as a place to explain why I'm qualified for, like, before this job, I had video production experience. So my cover letter, I explained that producing video aligns with producing events and programming, and got to draw some parallels in there that my resume can't communicate. So that was also a good opportunity to do that for me, in addition to the rest of the cover letter, just in terms of thinking of if people are entering a new field. Yeah, that's a thought. But yeah, that is that for those questions. And then I think we have about 10 minutes left, and we have a handful of questions. So
perfect. I'm on my last slide, so that'll give me time to go over the questions at the end. So the last slide is networking. So essentially this is ways that you can get your resume to the top of that list, is just to do network. So LinkedIn, use LinkedIn, make sure your LinkedIn is up to date. So if a recruiter does jump in and take a peek at your LinkedIn, they see your experiences, they see it's up to date. And also, if you're interested in an organization or you just recently applied to a job, take a look at LinkedIn and see if you know anybody that works at that organization too. So you can always utilize your alumni network too. So like, see if anybody from your institution, from your college happens to work there. Maybe a previous colleague happens to work there now. So see if you have any connections, if somebody that works at LinkedIn and are from your LinkedIn that works at that organization, and reach out to them and talk to them a little bit, because maybe they have influence in that hiring process and you don't even know it. So just touching base with them can go a long way too. And a lot of companies actually have referral programs where if a current employee refers somebody to work at their company, there's like bonuses for that current employee. So you never know that if you're reaching out to a fellow alum that works at that organization, maybe they have a referral program and they can give you that link and apply to it. So just a brief example of a referral program. We actually had an alum reached out to our office and said, hey, my company's hiring, here's the referral the referral link. And then so we actually shared that with our students, and a student applied through the referral link, actually got the job. And after, the hiring manager said that they gave that person a really solid shot because it came in from a referral, even though they're actually looking for somebody with 2+ years of experience. But because they came in through a referral, they looked at that applicant and realized, oh wow, this even though this is a 2020 grad, they actually have those 2 years of experience through their campus employment, through their internship opportunities. And that student was able to land that job through that referral. So you never know when that could be something. So we also say, like, get out there and network. I know today is a great chance to network through this event as well. So connect with me on LinkedIn, add me to your network. You never know when I could be the next hiring manager, or when somebody on my Facebook may post about an opportunity. And then also, I know the Massachusetts LGBT Chamber of Commerce does an awesome event. So make sure you're checking out all their events where you might be able to meet somebody new to add to your network. Eventbrite has so many awesome virtual networking events that they're doing like daily. So take a peek. You can search through like your industries of interest and go to an event where you can connect with individuals and get to build your professional network. Because like I said, you never know when somebody could be that next hiring manager or know of a job that they could refer you to. And then lastly, I'll say is email. I know I put the Gmail logo there, but whatever you have for email is just email and follow up. So like I was saying, that those recruiters have seen sometimes 5 times to 50 times more applications. Follow up via email if you have the email of that recruiter. Because I was chatting with a recruiter that is receiving a lot of applications, and she said she super welcomes the follow-up like a week after you apply, because then she knows that you're really interested in that position, and she's going to give you that extra look because they see that initiative. They see that you're a go-getter and that you're really interested. So now some big companies will say, do not call, do not email. So if that's specifically on that job posting, then yeah, you won't be able to do that because they asked you not to, and most likely that means you won't have a contact to be able to. But definitely email, follow up if you have that contact information from that job posting and you can. So these are just some quick, simple ways. Obviously, networking could be its own workshop in itself. So if you have more questions about networking, feel free to email me. But these are some small ways that your resume can get to the top of the list just by building that network and being connected to somebody that may know that hiring manager. So I know we have a bunch of questions, so maybe we can jump into those because that's the end.
Yay, thank you so much. And yeah, I'll get to questions. If you have any questions, feel free to submit them through the Q&A button. We'll try to get through as many as we can, and then if any aren't answered, I'm going to send an email out to all people who participated in this with answers as well. So yeah, we can get started. And for the people who are asking, I will be posting the recording of this, and it will be closed captioned on YouTube, and that link will be shared on our social media page, and I'll also email it out to everyone who is included in this. So scrolling up to earlier in the presentation, random question. A lot of job portals have a place where you upload a resume, and then the job portal itself picks up the pieces of the resume and like autofills it into sections. Is there a preferred like font or anything to make that easier for the system to do? I know when I do it, my resume always breaks it, and that's just how it is. But
yeah, unfortunately, those sometimes aren't the most like perfect systems. But were you asking like in terms of like a font to use in your resume?
That's part of the question.
Okay.
So yeah, if you want to touch on a few standards, I know. Yeah,
use like basic fonts, like a lot of times Microsoft automatically goes to Calibri now. That's a good font to use. You can use Times Roman, but use like those basic fonts. I'll say whatever your professors are asking for is standardly probably what a recruiter will like to see on there. So I know our resume templates are typed into Calibri.
nice. There was a question that if you had to drop out before graduating college or took a few years of college and took some time off, how should you address that on your resume, if at all?
Yeah, so that's like a couple different questions. So if you took some time off and then you came back, you'll definitely want to put like the 2 stints that you did. So do that first little bit of time and then have it come back on there as well. if you got your associates and then took some time off and came back and then got a bachelor's, you'll want to put those in there as like separate different degrees. If you're still working towards that degree and maybe you're taking just like 1 or 2 classes a year or something like that, you'll still want to put that as like working towards. But if you did drop out and you didn't receive any like credit from the institution, a lot of times you won't be able to put that there. If you didn't receive, like if you got like if you got the associate's degree, then you can put that on there. But if you're planning to come back and finish out at some point, then you can kind of still put that on there and say like working towards.
Got it, thanks. And then a similar question about if you transferred colleges.
Yeah, so if you transferred, you can still put both of those on there. So if you did like 1 semester at a college and then left, there's really no point in putting that 1 semester on there. But if you did like 2 years at one and 2 years at the other, you can include both of those as well. But really, that's like a personal preference. So maybe if you like were applying to a job and you knew that recruiting manager based on like stalking them on LinkedIn or something, you knew they went to your first institution, then maybe you'd put it on there to try to like catch them in. But really at the end of the day, you only really need to put the college that you received your degree from. So again, if you want to put it on there to try to catch a hiring manager that you know went there, you could, but really just put the one where you graduated from.
Nice. And then a question about applying in itself. Do you suggest doing multiple job applications at one organization? Would all of those get the same blanketed resume? Should there be a way to like differentiate between the ones that you send in, or tips around that?
Yeah, that's a tough one too, because some recruiters totally look at it different ways. So I've asked that question to recruiters as well. So some recruiter might be like, oh yeah, like apply to as many as you want. And they see that as you just really wanting to work at their organization. But then some recruiters might see that as not as much of a plus. So, but really make sure, because there is big organizations that have like that same job, maybe at different locations or something, or similar jobs. Maybe there's like a couple different like marketing positions. And if those are a similar job, but that's what your industry is, then you can apply to those same positions. I think sometimes recruiters have a hard time if you're applying to jobs that are so completely different. They have a hard time seeing you in those roles, because then they kind of think back to like your understanding of each role. So if they're similar roles, absolutely, that's okay to apply to multiple positions. If they're very different, sometimes you might just want to choose the one that you really see yourself to be a better fit for, because sometimes it may be like a little counterproductive. But you definitely want to make sure that when you're applying to those positions, to make them unique to each role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's see, what else? I think this ties into you saying that it's the person's individual document and they can choose to share whatever they would like to share, whatever makes them comfortable, whatever suits them. But somebody asked about specifically if you went to a women's college as a trans man, the idea of putting your college on if it triggers the thought of women's college, versus leaving it out because it might out someone, the dynamics around that, if you have any tips.
Yeah, so like I said, it is your document, and however you want to present. If you're not wanting people to focus on the school, then you can. I'm sorry, maybe we could actually have a conversation one-on-one if you'd like, to the individual that had this question. I'd like to be able to offer like some better insight for having to navigate that.
Yeah.
I will say it's funny, Emmanuel used to be a women's college for a really long time, and people still think we're an all women's college. Mm-hmm. So yeah, people sometimes still make those jumps to the institutions.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I can reach out to that person as an offline.
Yeah, but I'll say at the end of the day, do what you feel comfortable with. It's your document. Present how you want to present, and if you don't want to include that institution, then that's your choice too.
Yeah. There's another question when you're transitioning, sometimes there's a point where you have a legal name change. Sometimes there's a gray area where you're floating in between that. What do you recommend putting on people's resumes if there's an actual like job application system? What do you recommend putting in there?
Yeah, so job application systems, I've seen some now that have a name and then preferred name. So you would put, you can put your preferred name in there for them to address you correctly and make sure. And then you can also put that, because you know, because some people who go by like just like nicknames in general, like that's okay to like put whatever name you identify with on your resume, because they don't actually, employers don't really need your legal information until you're in that like onboarding process where they're processing like W-2s and so forth. So when you're in the application process, you can put whatever name you identify as and whatever name you feel comfortable with on your resume. Because I know some people who just put their nicknames on there in general. So employers don't need the legal information until you're much further on in that onboarding process. So put whatever name that you identify with and how you'd like to be addressed via like email and in that interview process. And a lot of applicant tracking systems are moving towards a lot more inclusive, identifying your name and your preferred name on them as well. So unfortunately, not all employers use those yet, but I've seen a lot of companies moving towards that direction.
Yeah, no, I definitely also recommend starting with the name that you go by. And then if there is a separate section that does say legal name in the place where you're putting in information, you can choose to do that. I also think that, yeah, just starting with your name and then letting any legal stuff that comes with filling out a W-9 or W-2 or whatever forms can happen later. Let's see, any last ones?
While Carly's looking through that, I put my in the chat. I know there's the question and answer box and then there's the chat box. So in the chat box, I put my email in there as well and my link to my LinkedIn URL. So you can connect with me via LinkedIn to help build your network. You can also email me or message me in LinkedIn if you have further questions and would like to talk more like one-on-one if you via email or through that chat if you don't feel like not feeling comfortable with the platform right now. So I would definitely love to have further conversations and be able to offer more one-on-one advice as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the last couple things, again, if we didn't get to your question, I have a list of all the questions and I'll make sure to distribute the answers via email and I'll send them to the whole group so that if one person is asking about a certain thing, somebody else in the group might need the answer as well and just might not be thinking to ask at this point. But one last thing, this is another like technical job application, which we've been running into and trying to push as a chamber to change, is if people have in the job apps, are you female or male, like very binary gender choosing. Do you have any tips of what people should do with this? I know my take is also if you make it to the job interview point, you can advocate for yourself in that interview and say, like you say that you're LGBT inclusive, but this is what's on your application. Yeah, and go from there. But I don't know if you have tips for the actual application page.
Yeah, so like Carly was saying too, I know there's another webinar on interviewing. So all the how to advocate for yourself in an interview and how to really ask like deflect certain questions and things like that too. I'm sure will come up in the interview one. But in terms of on the applicant tracking one, if you're asking, usually like we're saying that some employer they're adding more of, so that's too bad. I guess like it's too bad that employer is still having it be that like yes or no to option things. And I think sometimes like if you're seeing that as well, that might be a good sign for you that like, oh, maybe like this employer isn't a place that I can truly be my authentic self too. So, and sometimes you can assess a company through how their application process is, and is it inclusive? Is it, and if it's not really an inclusive application process, then that might be a good tip, that maybe that might not be an organization where you might be able to be your true authentic self and be comfortable. Because I will say, throughout, when you're researching companies to apply to, when you're in an interview process, it's more about you than it is about the employer, because you want to make sure that you're finding a company, an organization, a team that is somewhere where you want to work. So I can talk more onto, I do have a lot of tips and resources for finding those inclusive workspaces where it is a truly diverse and inclusive place where you want to work. I know the Human Rights Campaign, the organizations that Carly works with, the at the chamber, those are great organizations to take a look at. But that may be like a good tip, that if they don't have an inclusive application process, that that maybe it's not an organization that is somewhere that I know myself would want to work, or others would want to work, if it's not inclusive. So in terms of, I feel like that's a way to filter out an organization too.
No, definitely. And I think it's up to the person if you feel comfortable, if it really is a 2-option little drop down without like a prefer not to answer, without not like a non-listed where you can fill in the box. I think it's up to you to choose if you want to go to the next stage of it. And then if you want to advocate for yourself from there. That might just be, maybe the recruiter didn't know, maybe there's something just in their system that they haven't gotten a chance to change yet, but also it can be a sign that internally or structurally they aren't considering everyone who's applying. But yeah, on that note, I think we're about 8 minutes over. I'm gonna wrap it up.
Yeah, sorry folks if you had another meeting bumping up against this.
No worries at all. Thank you so much, Chelsea, for joining us. This was so great. And again, to everyone listening, I'll be distributing this. If you weren't rapidly taking notes the whole time, you'll have a chance to rewatch it or go to certain parts and listen again. But yeah, keep tuning in and registering. And thank you, everyone, so much for joining.
And thank you so much for joining, and reach out to me if you have any other further questions. But it was truly an honor to be part of Massachusetts LGBTQ+ Job Week. So thank you all for having me, and thank you all for listening. And I hope that you're able to walk away with some important tips on resumes and cover letters.